Ora, and welcome to Lesson 5 of the Words of Chemistry, writing formulae with polyatomic ions. First of all, let's define the terms ion and polyatomic ion. So an ion is a positively charged species, so it's an atom or a group of atoms. Polyatomic ion is specifically polyatomic, many atoms, so it's a group of atoms that has a positive or negative charge. Now here are some ions, polyatomic ions you need to know. There are actually even more, so it is quite overwhelming. So let's see how we can make it easier. So first of all, think of 8, a donut. So the O for donut. So if the compound ends in 8, or the ion ends in 8, you know it contains oxygen. Phosphate, phosphorus with oxygen. Sulfate, sulfur with oxygen. Carbonate, carbon with oxygen, and so on. You can also then use this mnemonic of school chef cook's next pancake to work out the number of oxygen atoms and the charge. The consonants are the number of oxygen atoms, the vowels are the charge. So school has got 4 consonants, so it's 4 oxygens in there, and 2 vowels, so the charge is -2. And you can do that for all of them. Also, 8 has fewer oxygen atoms than 8, so sulfate has got 4, sulfite has got 3. Nitrate has got 3, nitrite has got 2. There's chlorate and chlorite, fewer oxygen atoms. And then when you have hydrogen in the polyatomic ion, then the charge drops by a +1. So phosphate is PO4 3-, so hydrogen phosphate is HPO4 2-. And if you had dihydrogen phosphate, it would be H2PO4-. And similarly for carbonate, hydrogen carbonate, sulfate, hydrogen sulfate. So keep on practicing and learn those. So when we want to combine the ions, we want to have an overall neutral charge. So a positive will cancel out with 1 negative to give me an overall neutral charge. So ammonium nitrate has got 1 positive and 1 negative. So our formula is NH4NO3. Notice we leave out the charges. And the cation is always written before the anion. If I have a cation with a positive charge of 2, I'm going to use 2 anions to balance that charge if the anions only have a 1 negative charge each. So notice that I have to have a total neutral charge overall. So an example is calcium hydroxide. I've got 1 calcium to 2 hydroxides. So we show this by saying calcium hydroxide. We put the OH in brackets 2 to show we've got 2 hydroxides. 2 OHs, so the 2 applies to everything inside. It's 2 oxygens and 2 hydrogens. If I just wrote the CaOH2 without the brackets, it would look as though I've only got 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogens, which is incorrect. Now, we can have the opposite, like ammonium sulfate, and it's a similar sort of thing. We again use brackets. So the 4 inside the bracket only applies to the hydrogen in front. The 2 outside the bracket applies to everything inside, and the 4 outside the oxygen applies only to oxygen. Pause the video and see if you can work out the correct formulae in these 4 questions. Here are the answers. So magnesium nitrate, sodium carbonate, aluminium sulfate, and sodium chlorate. I hope you got them right. A quick method is a swap and drop. So if you know you've got to write the formula for ammonium carbonate, then the positive charge goes down, the 2- goes across. So I've got 2 ammoniums for every 1 carbonate. And so you just remove the charges and then put it together. For barium sulfate, you do again the swap and drop. Now we've got to have it in the simplest form, so we don't say Ba2SO4 2. It's in a ratio of 2 is to 2 or 1 is to 1 is the simplest form, and we never write 1s in chemistry, so it's barium sulfate. So pause the video and see if you can write the formulae. Here are the answers. Zinc hydroxide, ammonium phosphate, iron 3 sulfite. Notice it's sulfite, and the charge on the Fe is Fe3+ because we've said it's iron 3. Then silver sulfate and copper nitrate. Now it's just as important to be able to split a compound into its component ions, so you must practice doing this as well. So see if you can recognize the ions in each of these compounds. Pause the video and do this. Right, here are the answers. Potassium ions and permanganate ions. sodium ions and hydrogen carbonate ions, ammonium ions and chloride ions. Fe2 plus ions, you have to use the ratio to work out if it's Fe2 plus or Fe3 plus, and in this case it's Fe2 plus, and phosphate ions, and silver ions and hydrogen sulfide. Right, time for tips. Make your chemistry learning fun. Make up a series of paper dice where you write your ions on each side. You can do a number of them. Roll the cation dice, roll the anion dice, see if you can make a compound of the two together. And finally, said goodbye to copper sulfate. See you, SO4.